Welcome to the Legally Speaking podcast. I'm your host, Rob Hanna. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by Anne Rose. Anne runs a legal and regulatory blockchain group. She created the group whilst writing an academic article focusing on distributor-led technology and GDPR. In addition to this, Anne was recognized by Legal 500 in 2022 as a rising star. She is a managing associate at Mishcon de Reya, and her mission is to help normal lawyers understand the nuances in tech. Anne has experience in blockchain, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and commercial contracts. So a very, very warm welcome, Anne.
Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Super excited about this one, particularly as someone who's so keen on the world of blockchain and all things Web3. But before we dive into all your amazing projects and experiences to date, we do have a customary icebreaker question here on the Legally Speaking podcast, which is, on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very real, what would you rate the hit TV series Suits in terms of its reality?
This is quite hard because I've actually only seen one episode, and I've listened to quite a few of your past guests who rate it quite highly, whereas when I saw it, I was like, probably a 3. Loads of people were like, yeah, 8 is exactly what it's like. I was like, oh, okay. We're experiencing different things.
Yeah, exactly. Well, a 3, I think you've watched one, you've given it a good opinion, and with that, we will move swiftly on. So let's start at the beginning, Anne. Tell us a bit about your family background and your upbringing.
Yeah, so I was always a really curious child, and my parents really encouraged that. So I used to do lots of projects. I'd always ask why I could see what I could see. I used to spend a lot of my summer kind of doing science experiments in the kitchen, much to my mum's horrendous horror, exploding everything up. And then there was one kind of time when I remember we got our first computer, and I thought this was really, really exciting. I wanted to peer into it. I wanted to understand how it worked, and I wanted to understand how I could see what I could see on the screen. And I remember going with my dad to the library, and I saw there were some books and kind of thinking about how you could program. And I was like, this is exciting. I was like, let's give this a go. And so I got really into learning C+ and HTML, and I wanted to be able to design my own websites. And I used to create, as I was learning about space, I'd create my own space websites, and it had different music for different planets. And I really loved it. And it kind of my interest in technology kind of really went from there. And I just kept developing, and it wasn't until probably around, then kind of I was also very interested in blockchain when it started coming out, but it didn't really kind of take off until I got to around, say, 2017, when you had CryptoKitties. And it kind of reminds me of those old kind of Tamagotchis and new experiences. And I was like, oh, a bit of blast from the past. And I was like, oh, I really loved the technology and this kind of idea of kind of thinking about, digital assets and giving this kind of property right. And I was like, this is quite exciting. And I started to delve into the world of blockchain, and kind of went from there. That was my kind of interest in tech.
Yeah, and so you obviously were born a techie, obviously loved tech from a very, very early age. I was just having images of, I think, our first family PC, which I think was one of those white the brand Tiny back in the day. It was massive thing in the lounge. It was this thing that entered the house. But so it's great that you sort of talked about your tech interest, but I'd love to know sort of your legal interest. So do you mind telling us where your interest in the law started?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did a classics degree. I loved Latin, ancient Greek, and actually over lockdown, I had a slightly weird interest of getting into learning hieroglyphics, which I absolutely loved, and getting into Egyptology. And so when I was there, I did a dissertation, which kind of really looked at I loved philosophy as well. And I did a lot on Cicero and thinking about property rights and thinking about the law. I was like, this could be a really interesting career. I also was very interested in lots of other things. So like sports and nutrition, and I did everything. I did work experience, with MPs, in the legal space, in sports. I also did work in PR. I did loads and loads of different things, because I think without experience, you don't know what you want to do. And I think it can be really, really hard as well. Like when you're applying for a lot of vacation schemes, it talks as well about what experience have you had, but you're like, well, you need experience, like to get experience. And it's hard. It's very hard. And so actually, when I started actually after the law, after my degree, I'd go off and do what was called the GDL. I think it's all changing now, do my law conversion. And just before that, I did a vacation scheme at Ulswang. And then I also did some work experience as well at a local law firm. And then I applied for other schemes, and I did kind of experience everywhere from Baker McKenzie to Clifford Chance to Stevenson Harwood, lots of different ones, because as well, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And Stevenson Harwood, partly I applied there because I had an interest in ships. Like my grandfather loved ships, so I was like, I'm going to be a shipping lawyer. And actually, that was one of the reasons as well why I applied to Reed Smith. And so after I'd done some of the work experience, actually, like, this is something I really want to do. But after the GDL, I wasn't quite sure. So I did do a few other things, and I went traveling for a bit, and I came back, and I was actually doing a bit of PR, and I was also kind of writing apps as well for celebrities. And I found that quite fun. And then I thought, actually, I want to go back into the law. So that's when I kind of applied to Reed Smith, because I thought, the shipping space. And it was a tier 1 shipping firm. I got my training contract there. And actually where I was, we had to do as well with our LPC, like a master's in business. And as part of that, they also have a strategy element. And you get to have this amazing opportunity to have a secondment with a brand or a client of the firm. And so I was at Bauer Media, and part of that as well was my PR interest and things like that. And I met a woman there, and she said to me, if you're interested in tech, why don't you actually think about data protection technology? Go for it. Like, that is going to be the biggest thing ever. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'll try that. So I decided to do my first seat in that. And that was next to as well, like our media team, like film and TV. So I loved the data protection technology team. I really loved that seat. Then I did a secondment at Debenhams. And then when I came back, I did 2 media seats in film and TV, both commercial and litigation. But I did a lot of film and TV financing, a lot of work gaming, and just everything. It was fantastic. This incredible opportunity. And what I really loved about the firm is you didn't have to, in the media space, a lot of firms, you have to pick, okay, I want to be a sports lawyer. I want to be a film and TV lawyer, or I want to be a game lawyer. And you got the opportunity to work in everything, which I absolutely loved. And then I moved firms because I wanted to continue with that kind of variety. And so I actually moved to a firm which is called Simons, Moorhead and Burton, or SMAB. And so I got to work basically in 3 different teams. It was basically in retail, sports, and tech, and got to do everything. And it was one of those places, if you're enthusiastic and want to get involved, you could just get involved, that's everything, which was fantastic. And I really like that. And I love that, and I do think as well, as a junior lawyer, it is important to keep up with that variety, especially when you don't want to pigeonhole yourself. And the more experience you can get in everything, the better it is. And then from there, I then moved to Mishcon. And what I absolutely loved about the firm is they are so receptive to new ideas. I really wanted to set up a blockchain practice. And this was 2018. I am a 2-year qualified lawyer. And, I was like, I would absolutely love to do this. I think it would be great. And they were so receptive to it. It was amazing. And so, I moved there, and I moved into their commercial IP team. So I do a huge variety of different types of work, everything from kind of commercial IP and data protection, but in loads of different sectors. So I work with a lot of luxury brands, and I also work as well with kind of like companies in the hotel sector. I do a lot as well in the sports sector, and then in the pure tech space as well. And it's been fantastic. And I set up the practice with a colleague of mine, Tom Grogan, who has now actually seen the light and decided she doesn't want to be a lawyer anymore. And he's going to set up a different part of the business, which is called MDRX Tech. And that is actually where he's helping people to build their own platforms, which is amazing. And he also helps as well with the strategy and development of how people might want to go about their projects, auditing smart contracts, doing all some of the really fun kind of niche things that we can do there. And that's like a separate business that he set up. But yeah, so that's where we went from there. I loved all the different opportunities that were given. And yeah, I kind of really went from there.
Yeah, and thanks for such a comprehensive overview, because it's great advice that you're giving in terms of having that breadth of experience. You've gone from like a comment on Debenhams to then going into all these other multinational, international law firms and some smaller firms, and really kind of figuring out what it is that you want to do, and kind of having that breadth of experience, and then you sort of landed on your heart being set on blockchain, which we're going to now talk about. So let's take a step back first, though, for people who maybe are still trying to get their head around this new technology. What is blockchain in a simple form, and how can it be used in law?
So this is a really interesting one. And I think you've had loads of speakers on here who have talked about blockchain, and, like Charles did a fantastic podcast talking about it. And it's interesting. I had someone talk to me and they said to me, well, isn't blockchain just a form of bookkeeping, really? And they're like, doesn't that just sounds really dull? And I think one of the key things, there's an amazing quote from Mark Andreessen, and I think he sums it up so well. And he says, for the first time, it's a way for one internet user to transfer a unique piece of digital property to another internet user, such that the transfer is guaranteed to be safe and secure. Everyone knows that the transfer has taken place, and nobody can challenge the legitimacy of the transfer. And I really think the consequences of this breakthrough cannot be overstated. And that quote I love, because it's for the first time it gives us property rights.
Yeah.
And this is what's exciting. And I think that is what's so great about it. Yeah.
It's what I call the new T&C, transparency and control. That's what blockchain can give you, and I really, really like it. So, yeah.
That's a really interesting one, because that's also, if you look at the transition from, say, Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3, right? So if you look at Web 1, we're very much talking about like read only. Like, you remember, it's basically, you're talking about consuming data, right? And you've got MSN Messenger and things like that. And then we move on to creating content, Web 2. You've got YouTube coming out, Facebook, and it starts to change. And Web 3, what's exciting about that is that you actually start to be able to own things. And this is what's amazing. I mean, I don't know about you, but I use like the Brave browser as well. So, and when you use that as well, it pays me to watch adverts. I mean, I'm not talking very much. I mean, I probably make $5 a month, which then goes into my crypto wallet, but it's exciting. And I think it's a new way of how we are kind of receiving and analyzing content. It's great.
Yeah, and I love how you broke that down, because, folks, if you're listening in a very simple form, Web 1 was very much read, Web 2 was very much read, write, engage, and now Web 3 is read, write, engage, and own. And so it's super, super exciting where this new technology is leading us all in the whole decentralized movement. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about what a blockchain lawyer does day to day. Give us an example.
Yeah. So I think that's a really interesting question as well, because I feel like my role has changed as a lawyer. Yeah. I feel like I have become what I like to use the phrase a transactional engineer. And I kind of, if you think back as well to like the early days in Silicon Valley, and that was very much what they were starting to do then. And now I very much find in all the things that I work on, I am liaising constantly with like the legal team, the tech team, the marketing team, and you're trying to basically ensure that someone gets things done. But I'm not purely just focusing, say, on giving the legal advice. If we, let's say, we just use a pure project. So let's say, and what I love as well is I've been able to combine my interest in blockchain, specifically in this NFT space, with my love as well of luxury brands, and working a lot as well with my clients there in that retail space. And so every time they're doing a project, we sit down and we look through the legal issues, the commercial issues, and the tech issues. And often I am having to deal with all the people across the business. I'm not just dealing with the lawyers at all. I am having to ensure as well that everyone can understand and communicate each other when they're using this type of terminology. And you have a lot of the tech people who will, throw out standards, which, some people may be familiar with things like ISO 27001 standards if you're working in information technology security. And if you're also working in the blockchain space, you're interested in, say, Ethereum, they use ERC standards. And sometimes they'll bandy these around and they'll talk about different types of standards and royalty mechanisms. And you'll have the legal team who'll be like, what does this mean? And you're having to translate it as well between people. And so I often find like my work will involve like looking at all these different things. And you cannot draft a contract without understanding the technology that you're working with or what you're doing. Because, and I will always say, even if I've got someone who's helping me draft, say, a set of consumer T's and C's for a website, you have to do that user journey. You've got to go through it to understand it. And it's the same here in this space. If you're drafting something to help your client, to talk about how something is working, you have to understand that and you have to do it yourself and you've got to go through it. And so we're really trying to encourage people to do that here as well at the firm. So I would say like my role varies and I kind of get different queries coming in from day to day, which is what I love because it's always new. But it's very much, if we're kind of taking a project, it will be looking at all these different things, everything from drafting the documents, giving legal advice, looking at the holistic approach. So you're taking as well that kind of commercial view, liaising not only with the legal team, but also everyone else in kind of intending. Because as well, like if you're doing a big project, I'm going to have to liaise with the marketing team to talk about how their advertising work. Does it comply as well with some of the new guidance that's come out from the UK Advertising Standards Authority, and doing analysis on that. And so you have to just work with absolutely everybody to ensure it's all, they have the right policy documents as well in place and so forth.
Yeah, and it's super, super exciting. And you touched on something else that I'm super passionate about, because I believe everything will be, an NFT in some description in the future when it comes to ownership. But again, for people who are probably new to this, what is an NFT and what could this mean for the legal industry?
So that's a really interesting question. So I think NFT, one of the key things is non-fungible. Right. So like fungible means you can trade one thing for another. So if I gave you a £5 note, you probably wouldn't mind if I gave you 5 £1 coins. You might be a little bit annoyed because it's heavy and you're carrying around in your pocket. Yeah. But otherwise you're like, yeah, okay, it's the same value. Whereas if, let's say, we take a piece of artwork, and I was going to give you an Andy Warhol, and then you're looking at, say, another artist like a Renoir, they're not going to be the same. And I think art is quite a good example of that. They won't have the same value, and one feature that you like of one is not going to be in the same. So that's what non-fungible is. They cannot be. They are unique. They are unique digital assets, and that's what's really exciting about them. And I think one of the really exciting things that we've seen is the blockchain world is a community, right? And so it's constantly developing. And the problems come along and they're creating new solutions. And you look at some of the old NFTs, they are awful quality, terrible. The pixels are awful. And one of the reasons for that as well is because everything is uploaded on chain. So, you've got like the digital asset itself, the underlying, let's say we're doing art as a very basic example, of digital art, and the representation of the NFT, what's associated with it, the underlying asset is a digital piece of artwork. They'd upload everything on chain. It's time consuming, takes up a lot of energy, and it's slow. Whereas now as well, a lot of people just put in, say, a URL in the metadata. That is all an NFT is. It is metadata. And I think this is one of the key things that's we're finding as well, is a bit of an issue as well with consumers. People don't really understand what they're buying. Mm-hmm. They are buying, when you're looking at an NFT, you do not buy, if we're using the example of digital art, that underlying digital asset. You do not buy that. You do not own that. You don't have copyright in that. You are just buying the NFT, which is metadata, which there are loads of different ways of going about it, but it may just say contain a URL link to that particular, where that underlying digital asset is. And often as well, you'll want to make sure that it's all then held and pinned to what's called an interplanetary file sharing system, which, if you remember, like the likes of BitTorrent and things like that, it's very similar, that kind of centralized system. And it helps because you see a lot of consumers who go like, okay, well, I can't see my NFT. It says, oops, broken link, like you might get when you've got a URL, standard URL website. And this kind of helps create some kind of extra safety precautions as well for where you're actually storing that underlying asset. And I think this is one of the key messages. And I think that's why we've had loads of things out in the press, and why the Advertising Standards Authority is really trying to crack down in terms of thinking about its enforcement notice, which recently come out, and they'll start taking action, I think, from the 2nd of May. And it's really trying to ensure as well that consumers understand, okay, what am I buying here? What is the value in this? And ensuring that they feel well versed. I was talking to a client the other day who said that they tried to buy an NFT from a luxury brand, and they just felt they're very bright. And they just felt the whole process, they just didn't understand it. They didn't understand how they were setting up their own wallet and how they're going about it. And they just felt they were made to feel stupid because they didn't feel the instructions there on buying it were very good.
It's so true. And even, when we're having to, non-fungible token is not an easy thing to understand. Maybe, if you think about that, because people will be like, well, should I know what non-fungible means? And then you think about minting to do something on the blockchain, and then gas fees. Isn't gas what I put in my car if you're in the US or over here? And all of these, so something to be said for, the adoption, because, another initiative I'm involved with called Virtual Insanity, we're trying to bridge the gap between the mainstream and the metaverse because it's so wide right now, in terms of this the knowledge gap. And it's great that people like you are doing so much, not only to shake up the legal industry, but give back through so many initiatives that you're involved in. Time for a quick break from the show. Are you a legal aid practitioner in England and Wales, specializing in civil or criminal legal aid matters? If you are, this message is for you. As a legal aid solicitor, you don't have time to waste on legal aid case management software that doesn't work to your needs. That's why Clio has developed a quicker, more accurate and affordable solution for legal aid solicitors in England and Wales. It could save you hours in your month, particularly when it comes to end of month invoicing and claims to the legal aid agency. To see how it all works, visit clio.com/UK/legal aid. That's Clio, CLIO.com/UK/legal aid. Now back to the show. You have an inspiring story because you talked about at 2PQE, you said you wanted to create this blockchain. You are now the co-lead of the blockchain group, and you've kind of articulated a bit about what you get up to. But just for people coming in thinking, well, I'm 2PQ, I want to influence or make something happen within my firm. What practical things did you do? What did you have to do to make that a reality?
That's very interesting. This reminds me of when I was actually on my secondment as a trainee, and my supervisor there said to me, it's all about your brand. It's all right back then. I was all about brand and Rogers, and he was like, "This is something you need to work on and think about." And I would say, for junior lawyers, one of the best things you can do is knowledge, reading everything, and when you read something, make a product of it. So if that's creating an article that you want to put out there, do that. If that's not your thing and you're actually much better at, say, producing podcasts, create your own podcast on something that you've read, but try and think about a deliverable that you think is great to show. You've read it, you know what you're talking about, and if someone wants to ask you about it, you can tell them chapter and verse about what you've read and why it's important and how you can help. And I think one of the biggest things that you can do is from an early stage is thinking about how you can build up your brand. And so it's kind of thinking about what you want to be known for, how you're going about it. And like, for instance, even you mentioned kindly in the introduction about like one of the academic articles I wrote. And one of the reasons I did that is because when I set up the practice to be taken seriously, you have to make sure you really understand what you're talking about. And so that's why I applied to write for an academic article to go into that. And then that's what then spiraled me to think, there must be loads of other people who are working in this space and want guidance in terms of either thinking about either understanding technology or understanding how their area, their sector that they're working in applies in terms of thinking about, okay, so how is this technology affecting my practice area? And then also thinking about, okay, so do we need changes in the law or do we need further guidance or things like that? And that's when I decided to set up the group with Tech London Advocates and approach the Law Society. And seriously, when I set up this group, I just emailed people. I emailed people working in this space and I hoped people would turn up. I messaged around 30 people. I didn't know if anyone would actually come, and fortunately all 30 people came and were excited by the initiative and were like, yes, let's get involved. And so I was like, great, okay. And then that then led me to be, it was very lucky to be approached to kind of work with Sir Geoffrey Voss, the Master of the Rolls, to actually be part of the Law Tech Delivery Panel and their subcommittee in terms of thinking about drafting some of these amazing things, and working on, say, like the online digital dispute resolution rules, which we had come out last year. And then as well, work with Sarah Green, who I think is absolutely fabulous in terms of thinking about, you know, the Law Commission's consultation smart contracts, which came out last November. And it was fantastic to work with her on that and to talk with her about it and things like that. And it's just kind of thinking about like the different initiatives that you want to do and how you best, how there's no right or wrong, right? You know, it's working out what your strengths are and then playing to that.
And that's such good advice, folks. I would strongly recommend rewinding that and clipping that and just remembering that at any stage of your career, because you talk about something I'm so passionate about, the power of a personal brand. You know, you can lose a job. You can have some bad luck, but no one can take your personal brand away from you. It's your insurance policy. It's your best lead magnet. It's your best conversation starter. And the more you invest in that personal brand, the more opportunities, the more things will come your way. And look, you're a fantastic case study of that. And you gave some examples as well. And people say to me, yeah, but Rob, I don't like video. Or, hey, Rob, I'm not very good at writing. Well, use the WAV strategy, written, audio, or video. Choose what you want, you know, and go all in on whichever one of those suits you best and build your personal brand. And so congratulations to you, Anne, because this is something we're trying to educate the next generation of lawyers and the current generation of lawyers of how to do it. And, you know, you are one of the few that have achieved so much within serious law firms through building a personal brand and then being so proactive to use that to influence, to make things happen, to benefit your career. So really, really well done. Thrilling discussion. Thank you for sharing that. So let's move on. You are also the director of thinkBLOCKtank. So Can you explain more about this position to us?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is more we're part of a NAPA, so we feed into that as well, which is part of like the European Commission, who are kind of looking as well at how we can be using blockchain throughout various different sectors. And my role as director there is about education. It's about helping people to understand the technology on an international scale. And that's also one of the things I kind of want to build up into actually the next report, for which I'm doing with Tech London Advocates and the Law Society, which we hope to release at the beginning of next year, which will have international elements in. So to look at what people are doing globally and how they understand the space in lots of different sectors. And so with a whole load of lots of different kind of like-minded individuals, we are coming up with various initiatives and events and things that we can like think about to actually help help the sector, help the community, and go from there. And that's been a fantastic initiative to be a part of.
Yeah, and it doesn't stop there either, because you were previously part of the APPG blockchain and advisory board of the UK Parliament. Its focus was on blockchain and other technologies to benefit from innovation. So can you tell us more about your experiences there whilst being part of the body?
Yeah, I mean, that was a fantastic experience. And they do as well lots of different talks and groups. And basically you'd have lots of monthly sessions. And you look at different sectors in which blockchain can be applied, and you'd hear from people working in these sectors, whether it was something in the trade and emissions industry, whether we're looking at the hotel sector, anything, and hearing about what people are doing in this space. And also, I think one of the things to remember as well, when we talk about distributed ledger technology, there are so many different types. Blockchain is just one of these. And so people talked about it in a much wider context, which I really liked. And, whether they're talking about directed acyclic graphs, DAG, it was huge. And so you got to actually talk with other kind of individuals who are either really prominent in the sector, but don't understand the technology, or they're lucky enough to have both. Or you're just talking to other like-minded people who are kind of working in this space and just want to see how it's playing out in other sectors, and whether we need policy papers, whether we need to be looking at changes in the law, whether we need kind of FAQs and guidance. And that's one of the purposes of it. It's kind of not only an education element, but are there follow-ups that we need to do as a result of that? And that's what I thought was fascinating, to feed in on that. And if you feel very strongly about something as to whether you should or should not, it's great to be a part of that and to have a voice. And, I highly recommend anything you are passionate about and want to get involved in, do, because people listen to you, and no matter what early stage or late stage you're at, everyone has the entitlement to have a voice and be heard.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. +1 to that for sure. So, you have done so much throughout your career. And one of the things you talked about earlier in the conversation was you've worked for US and UK firms of all different sizes. So, what have been the benefits of these experiences that have formed parts of your career?
That's a very interesting question. And for me, it was so important to get that variety experience. I wanted to understand what it was like at a US law firm. I wanted to see what Magic Circle was like. And I think when you're applying for different law firms, they really are all so different. And even though someone might say, oh, it's all the same, but everyone has a different culture. And until you experience it and you're actually there, you don't experience that culture. You can read all the prints about, okay, these are their values. Often people have very similar values, and it's very hard to distinguish between all of them as to what really excites you and what you want to do. And I think, if you can go, I still think that starting at kind of like a bigger firm helps, and having the opportunity, and also, but you have to sit back and think about what you want. Do you want the opportunity to travel? Do you want the opportunity to be seconded in to see what in-house is like and what other clients, and working, really building up a relationship with the client? Because at the end of the day, whilst you can be interested in the legal side, it's also about bringing in business. And you can never start thinking about that too early. Like we were talking about the brands, thinking about, okay, what do clients need? How can we add value? And, a law firm is still a business at the end of the day, and it's understanding how you can do that. And so you kind of, by having the experience of going to lots of different places, you can have a feel as to, do you like working in small teams, big teams? I've always been someone who likes working in a small team. And I've always been in a tiny team. And I like that. But also what I kind of like about my role is, even though it's a small team, because of the nature of my work, I work with everyone across the business. So whether I'm working in tax or corporate, employment, litigation, fraud, and it's great because I get to meet all these wonderful people in all these different sectors and areas, and you get to really understand and know people at the firm. And so then you're kind of thinking about, okay, what sector you want to do, what your specialism is. Do you just want to be a firm only focuses on one particular sector. It's so many different things to think about. Whereas like my husband's opposite is kind of much more magic circle firm, and very likes having a big team, and it's a core specialism, he's built up on that. It's I think it's so valuable to get experience everywhere, because someone can say, it's like, even me, I thought I wanted to be a shipping lawyer. And then I realized that's not what I wanted to be.
Very, very true. Very, very true.
You go in with one thing, and even my husband, he went in being like, I want to be a corporate lawyer. And now he's a pensions lawyer. Pension specialist. So you just don't know, and it's great until you get that experience, you have no idea what you want to do and where you want to go. And, it's never say no to anything. Always try everything.
Always be curious. I love that. And always be open to learning and trying and just doing things. So I love that about you and being so proactive. So, currently, Anne, you are the managing associate for Mishcon de Reya and previously an associate. So again, for people who probably don't quite know what that promotion looks like, how does the role of a managing associate differ from associate, and what are some of maybe the extra roles and responsibilities that you undertake?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say what some of the key things are, you're managing people, and you manage both up and down. So, you're there to help people who are more junior in the team to develop, and you help them not only maybe with their work, but any queries that they have, or their personal development process, or getting involved in different initiatives that they may want to do, offering guidance as well, whether that's pure legal questions or whether it's from a career perspective or anything like that. And then it's also managing up. So it's also kind of dealing with the partners, and managing the workload from them, and then deciding whether that then needs to be distributed down further, or whether it's actually like, okay, so we've got these particular matters in, who's mattering partner that, but I will run the matters. You're normally responsible as well for kind of managing client fees, making sure everything's set up. You've done all like the conflict checks will be done appropriately, all the stuff that you really need to do to ensure that you can actually do the work and deliver it. All the AML checks have been done, everything's on file, the files run smoothly, and the client's happy. One thing I always do as well is when we finish a transaction, and the first time I did it, I found it terrifying. I will send a message to the client and ask them for feedback as to how they found the service, and what is there things we can change? Are there things that we can do like that we did well? Are there things that we didn't do that well? How did you like how we explained things? And interestingly, I had one client who I found out when I messaged him that he was dyslexic, and he said that actually could you maybe produce advice in different formats? And so from then on, I actually decided to produce my work for him almost in a table format. Things are color-coded, rather than, say, a legal stream of advice, because for him, that's not a way that he was actually able to process information. And so it's actually being receptive to different ways, and you might be able to deliver as well your content. And so I found that really interesting. So those are some of the things that I probably do in terms of like your new role. And then you're always as well, normally like the first point of contact as well from other people across the firm. So, if they're not going to talk to the partner, they'll come to you, and then you manage it. You manage the transaction. You decide, do we need people like higher up in the space with more experience? Do we need more of the juniors? Do we need like people to get involved in that sense? And so you're basically the person there. It is genuinely managing everything.
Yeah. Love it. And thanks for being so thorough again of sort of articulating that and how that progression looks and what that looks like. So I want to sort of ask a bit more on the blockchain side for people listening in, because it is becoming more prevalent. How can people looking to get into legal blockchain work maybe perhaps best prepare themselves for this? And what advice do you wish you were given had you known at the beginning of your journey that you'd wanted to sort of get into blockchain specifically?
That's very interesting. I think, it's one of those ones you have to learn all the time. the space is changing all the time. It's not like if someone said to me they're really interested in contract law and you say, okay, look, great, these are things you can go away and read. And also as well, Chitty is just wonderful, check that out. You cannot do that in this space. And it's growing and it's changing so much. You have to embrace it wholeheartedly. You've got to get involved. You've got to dabble in it, try a few things, but obviously as well, don't spend money that you don't have. Be careful. But it's about, there's a lot of information out there, and it's deciphering what's the good stuff from the bad stuff. And so, people sometimes ask as well for reading packages. What sort of things can I read? What can I listen to? And there are so many podcasts out there and so many bits of reading material. And there are some really great ones. And I quite like as well, Exponential Views, quite a good one. And then there are also some great podcasts. But I think if you're really particularly interested in the legal space, it's thinking about how, if you're already qualified, how you can apply your sector and knowledge specialism in that area to blockchain. And then it's like thinking about, okay, does it even work? Or are you trying to come up with a use case that actually it's not even there? And then it's thinking about, okay, so what events are there? What other people out there? I find LinkedIn is an amazing community, and I have people message me all the time wanting to either learn more or get involved in the space or things like that. And genuinely, if you read anything out there, or you've read something from a particular lawyer, or you've seen them at an event speak, or that they work in a particular sector, reach out to them, talk to them. And people are often quite receptive, and that they'll message you back, and they might have some great tidbits or some knowledge which they can dispel to you, or anything like that. And I think that's one of the biggest things. It's having that courage to kind of go out. And one thing I would say, obviously, I would plug my the legal the Tech London Advocates Blockchain Legal and Regulatory Group report, which is available in the Law Society, which is great to it's got it's got a chapter in really understanding what blockchain is. And then it tries to cover as many sectors as it can, everything from, disputes and IP to thinking about financial regs, to tax, everything. So if you do have an interest in it, there might be a sector there that, you can get involved in. And if anyone wants to contribute and feels like there are sectors that are missing, then, I'm always up for new volunteers and people who are interested in the space and want to get involved, because that's fantastic. And we hope to have new chapters as well, and your particular interests as well in metaverse. And thinking about some of, issues as well, possessory rights and location issues, and everything, IP, and how you can protect yourself as brands. So it's going to be an exciting few years, and I don't think this is going to go away anywhere. So no.
It's only going to increase and become more and more interesting. And certainly if you're thinking about areas to go in within the law, you definitely want to be checking out Anne and what she's doing, because it's only going to heat up, and it's exciting change and disruption coming, which I think is super, super interesting. So, Anne, we have got through an absolute ton today, and it's been awesome talking to you. If people want to follow or get in touch with you about anything we discussed today, or as you mentioned about maybe contributing, what would be the best way for them to contact you? Feel free to shout out any social media or website links, and we'll also share them with this episode for you too.
Oh, thank you. I probably think email's the best. It sounds so old school. I think everyone always messages me in loads of different platforms. I can have like a Discord message, WhatsApp, email. It could be anything, Teams. But probably email. So it's anne.rose@mishcon.com, or message me on LinkedIn. It's just Anne Rose. You'll find me there. I'm also on Twitter, which is Anne_Emma_Rose. But I must confess, I am not an active Twitter user. But please do feel free to message me on there if you want to. And those are probably like the three key ones I would suggest.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned Discord, because certain people who are not in the gaming or Web3 industry may be like, what's Discord? So guys, go away and Google it. It's definitely a platform that people are using in the Web3 for community building. And I'm going to send you a link to our Discord channel as well. So it's been absolute pleasure having you on the show today. Really, really enjoyed it. So glad we managed to make it happen. So wishing you lots of continued success with your career and future pursuits. But for now, from all of us on the Legally Speaking podcast, over and out. This week's review comes from Stylish in the City 23. Educate, entertain, and inspired. 5 stars. Rob has done an amazing job of educating, entertaining, and inspiring his audience. Rob is not only a dynamic podcast host, but also a captivating guest. I've had the pleasure of having Rob as a guest on my podcast, Mesmerizing Marketing, multiple times. Rob goes the extra mile to provide value to his audience. Highly recommend the Legally Speaking podcast. Thank you so much to Stylish in the City 23 for your lovely, kind review. From all of us on the show, we appreciate you.